The year was 1953, and in the vibrant, sun-drenched city of Miami, Florida, a seemingly ordinary moment was about to be captured, one that would, half a century later, unravel a silent mystery. 5-year-old Ethan Caldwell, a boy of boundless energy and innocent curiosity, knew nothing of the profound secret his developing body held. His world was a delightful blur of sandy beaches, the scent of blossoming bougainvillea, and the distant hum of seaplanes taking off from the bay. His parents, youthful and beaming with pride, decided it was time for a proper family portrait, a timeless memento of their sweet boy at this charming age. They chose a quaint, old-fashioned photography studio downtown, its window displaying sepia-toned portraits of families long forgotten. Inside, the air hummed with a quiet formality. The photographer, a portly man with a kind smile and a worn camera, positioned them against a painted backdrop depicting an idealized, verdant garden. Ethan, restless as any child his age, fidgeted, eager to return to his outdoor adventures. His mother, Mary, a woman in her late 20s with soft dark hair pulled back neatly, gently held his hand, her smile a mixture of tenderness and slight exasperation. His father, James, a strapping man in his early 30s with a strong jawline and neatly combed brown hair, placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. As the photographer ducked behind his large wooden camera, the studio lights flared, casting a sharp momentary glow. A soft click of the shutter echoed, sealing that precise instant in time. No one in the room, least of all the unaware parents, could have grasped the extraordinary power residing within that single black-and-white print. The resulting photograph was a classic of its era, a crisp, monochrome image with soft edges. James and Mary smiled a little stiffly at the camera, and there between them stood Ethan, a slender, almost delicate figure. His small hands, prominently displayed in the foreground, appeared notably long for a child his age, his fingers surprisingly extended, almost reaching for something unseen beyond the frame. A subtle elongation in his limbs, a hint of disproportion that any loving parent might simply attribute to a sudden growth spurt, was quietly, almost imperceptibly present. It was a detail too subtle for the untrained eye to truly register, a silent whisper of something profoundly significant, hidden in plain sight. This is the story of how one unassuming black-and-white photograph, taken decades ago, held the key to a hidden genetic condition, ultimately saving a life. Watch until the end to discover the astonishing truth behind this mystery, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories. Tell us in the comments, from which city are you watching this video? Ethan Caldwell grew, much like the palm trees swaying gently in the Miami breeze, taller and more slender with each passing year. His childhood was idyllic, filled with school, friends, and the endless allure of the ocean. To his parents, Mary and James, his growth was a source of quiet pride. He shot up faster than most of his peers, and his limbs seemed to stretch endlessly, giving him an almost graceful, albeit slightly gangly, appearance. His hands, even as he reached adolescence, remained notably long, his fingers tapering elegantly, much like those the old photographer had subtly highlighted in the family portrait. These features, though distinct, were easily dismissed as part of his family lineage. James's grandmother had been unusually tall, and Mary's side of the family boasted several members with slender builds and delicate hands. There was nothing alarming about it, simply a unique physical signature that made Ethan, well, Ethan. As he entered his teenage years, Ethan excelled in sports, particularly basketball, where his height and reach became undeniable assets. He could effortlessly block shots and grab rebounds, often to the amazement of his teammates and coaches. He was agile, seemingly effortlessly navigating the court with a lightness that belied his increasing stature. Yet, beneath this seemingly robust exterior, subtle inconsistencies began to surface. He often felt a profound, inexplicable fatigue, a weariness that seeped into his bones even after a full night's sleep. He would wake up feeling as if he had run a marathon, a stark contrast to the energy levels of his friends. He attributed it to rapid growth, the demands of school, or simply being a teenager who needed more rest. His parents, seeing him thrive in sports and academics, had no reason to suspect otherwise. Occasionally, after a particularly intense game or a long day of studying, Ethan would experience a strange, fleeting breathlessness. It felt as though his lungs couldn't quite draw enough air, a sensation that would quickly pass, leaving him slightly disoriented, but ultimately dismissing it as a momentary strain. He never mentioned these episodes to his parents, not wanting to worry them, and convinced himself they were insignificant. His vision, too, began to subtly blur. He'd squint to read distant street signs or the blackboard in class, especially in dim light. An optometrist prescribed glasses for a mild case of myopia, but Ethan rarely wore them, finding them cumbersome and believing his vision issues were minor, just another common inconvenience of growing up. There were also times when a dull ache would settle in his joints, particularly his knees and elbows, after prolonged periods of activity. He put it down to growing pains, or the inevitable bumps and bruises of an active life. He stretched more, tried to ignore the discomfort, and focused on his studies and friendships. Ethan was a resilient young man, navigating the typical challenges of adolescence with an underlying sense of calm. He had no reason to suspect that these seemingly disparate symptoms, the fatigue, the occasional breathlessness, the blurry vision, the joint aches, were not isolated incidents, but rather threads woven into a larger, more complex tapestry of a condition developing silently within him. Each overlooked distinction and dismissed alarm bell allowed the hidden threat to solidify its hold, imperceptibly shaping his future, inch by quiet inch. The life he lived, seemingly normal and full of promise, was in fact unfolding on the precipice of a revelation that would reshape everything he knew. As Ethan Caldwell navigated the complexities of adolescence and ventured into young adulthood, the black and white photograph, taken in that unassuming Miami studio in 1953, gradually receded into the background of his family's life. It wasn't a deliberate act of discarding, rather it was the natural progression of time, the ebb and flow of memories, and the relentless accumulation of new experiences that slowly pushed the old image into the realm of the forgotten. For a time, the framed photograph held a place of honor on the living room mantelpiece, nestled among more recent snapshots of family vacations and school events. Mary, Ethan's mother, would occasionally dust it, her fingers lingering on her 5-year-old son's earnest face, a faint smile touching her lips as she recalled the day it was taken. James, his father, less prone to overt sentimentality, would sometimes glance at it as he passed, a quiet nod to the passage of time and the growth of their only child. But life, with its ceaseless demands and transitions, rarely allows static objects to retain their prominence indefinitely. When Ethan left for college, a sprawling campus several states away, the house in Miami felt suddenly cavernous to Mary and James. They decided it was time for a refresh, a subtle reorganization to fill the newly felt void. During one such redecoration of the living room, the mantelpiece was cleared. The old photograph, along with a collection of other aging pictures, found itself gently placed into a large cardboard box. This box, destined for the attic, became a repository for items deemed too precious to discard, but not quite relevant enough for immediate display. Into it went yellowed letters, well-loved but rarely opened books, stacks of Ethan's childhood drawings, and brittle newspaper clippings marking long-past milestones. The box then joined a silent legion of similar containers in the dusty, temperature-controlled attic, where sunlight rarely pierced the gloom, and memories slowly faded amidst the scent of aged paper and forgotten dreams. Life continued its relentless march. James received a promotion that necessitated a move, a significant relocation to a new city hundreds of miles away. The Caldwells decided to sell their beloved Miami home, the house where Ethan had grown up, where countless memories were etched into the very walls. Selling a home after decades of occupancy is an arduous task, a painstaking process of sifting through a lifetime's worth of accumulated possessions. Some items were donated, others sold at a yard sale, and a select few were carefully packed for the journey to their new residence. In the whirlwind of packing, under the pressure to clear the house quickly for the new owners, the box containing the photographs and other sentimental odds and ends was designated for temporary storage. They entrusted it to close family friends, the Millers, with a casual promise to retrieve it sometime soon. Ethan, immersed in his demanding college studies and adapting to a new life far from home, rarely thought of the old snapshot. His conversations with his parents revolved around his academic progress, his social life, and plans for holiday visits, but never the forgotten relics of his distant childhood. The photograph, once a vivid capture of a moment, dissolved into a faint, indistinct memory, a silent piece of history swallowed by the current of time. Decades flowed by like the lazy currents of the Miami River. The box, with the hidden photograph nestled deep inside, remained untouched in the Miller's attic, gradually accumulating more dust, more layers of benign neglect. The Millers themselves aged, their children grew up and moved away, creating their own lives. No one among them ever thought to open that particular box, to re-examine its contents. It was just one of many forgotten items left by friends who had moved on, awaiting a retrieval that seemed to perpetually hover on a distant horizon. Thus, unbeknownst to anyone, the photograph that held a vital clue to a serious, silent health condition lay dormant, its potential power to unlock a life-saving truth imprisoned by the passage of 50 years. The subtle anomalies it captured remained unseen, its silent warning unheard, while the quiet threat within Ethan's own body continued its insidious progression, inching ever closer to a point of no return. The stage was set, unknowingly, for a remarkable collision of past and present. Ethan Caldwell transitioned into adulthood, carrying the subtle, unnoticed burdens of his unique physicality, viewing them not as anomalies but as the unremarkable characteristics of his own being. He graduated from college with a degree in architecture, drawn to the precision and artistry of shaping the built environment. He secured a promising position at a reputable firm in Miami, a city that now pulsed with an even more vibrant energy than his childhood memories held. His life was a tapestry woven with demanding work, infrequent but cherished visits to his parents, who had retired to a quieter coastal town, and a series of earnest, yet ultimately fleeting, relationships. He was respected by his colleagues for his sharp intellect and innovative design solutions, often working long hours. But beneath this veneer of success, his body often rebelled in ways he stubbornly chose to disregard. A profound, persistent fatigue became his unwelcome companion. After a full day at the office, a day that for most of his peers might conclude with invigorating runs along the beach or lively social gatherings, Ethan found himself utterly depleted. He craved the solitude of his apartment, needing extensive hours of sleep to even remotely recover. He rationalized it as the unavoidable consequence of a high-pressure career, the relentless pace of urban life, or perhaps a lingering effect from a forgotten flu. Yet an insidious whisper within him hinted that this weariness was far from ordinary. The occasional breathlessness that had surfaced in his youth now occurred with alarming regularity, particularly during moderate physical exertion. A brisk walk up a flight of stairs, a hurried pace to catch a bus, or even a sustained conversation could leave him gasping for air, his heart pounding with an unsettling intensity. He'd blame it on Miami's humidity, a lack of recent exercise, anything to avoid confronting the unsettling reality. He tried to incorporate light workouts into his routine, but even gentle jogging left him lightheaded and weak, forcing him to abandon the effort and reinforcing his self-diagnosed poor stamina. These episodes grew more frequent, more insistent, yet Ethan, like many men of his generation, possessed a deep-seated reluctance to seek medical attention unless absolutely necessary. He prided himself on his self-sufficiency, convinced he could manage any discomfort through sheer willpower. His vision, which had subtly blurred since his teenage years, continued its slow, inexorable decline. The world around him seemed perpetually veiled in a fine mist, especially in low light or under the glare of the relentless Florida sun. He'd unconsciously squint to decipher restaurant menus from across a table or recognize faces from a distance. The prescription glasses he had received years ago remained largely untouched, tucked away in a drawer, a testament to his ingrained habit of ignoring minor inconveniences. He reasoned it was simply the inevitable march of age, a common occurrence for someone in his mid-40s. He had adapted to navigating a slightly indistinct world, just as he had adapted to his constant fatigue and occasional breathlessness. Moreover, a strange, intermittent, tingling sensation sometimes afflicted his extremities, and his joints, particularly his knees and elbows, would occasionally throb with sharp, fleeting pains. He dismissed these as residual effects from his earlier athletic endeavors or the inevitable aches of prolonged hours hunched over a drafting table. He never once considered that these seemingly disconnected symptoms, these quiet alarms sounding within his own body, could be intrinsically linked, the insidious manifestations of a silent, cunning disease meticulously undermining his very being. Outwardly, Ethan's life was a picture of professional success and quiet contentment. He owned a stylish apartment overlooking the vibrant city, enjoyed the company of a close circle of friends, and pursued various hobbies, though none with the vigor he once possessed. Yet, deep within, an unspoken disquiet persisted, a vague, undefined sense that something was fundamentally amiss, that his body was not entirely his own. He yearned for clarity, for an explanation for these persistent, perplexing sensations, but his ingrained stoicism and aversion to medical intervention prevented him from seeking it. He continued to defer a comprehensive medical checkup, pushing it off until next month, when things calm down, or when the symptoms get worse, until a confluence of events would wrench him from his complacency, forcing him to confront the hidden truth that awaited him, quietly concealed within a piece of his own distant past. His future, so carefully planned, hung precariously, tethered to a secret he never knew he carried. Life in Miami continued its vibrant, unyielding pace, and Ethan Caldwell, despite the subtle, unsettling alarms his body occasionally sounded, remained largely consumed by the present. The cardboard boxes from his family's distant move remained largely undisturbed in his storage unit, a silent repository of forgotten history. The old photo album, unearthed during his New Jersey visit, rested quietly on his coffee table, a seldom opened portal to a bygone era. He would sometimes glance at it, a fleeting pang of nostalgia, his only response, but the deeper unsettling feeling that had stirred within him during its rediscovery had, for a time, receded into the background of his conscious thoughts. Fate, however, often orchestrates its most profound interventions through seemingly mundane events. It was a humid Saturday afternoon in early March 2003, just a few weeks shy of Ethan's 55th birthday. He was preparing for a small, casual gathering with a few close friends. Among them was Marcus Thorne, a longtime friend from his college days, and now a respected historian specializing in early to mid-20th century American photography. Marcus possessed an almost uncanny ability to discern narratives and hidden meanings within old images, a skill honed by decades of meticulous research and passionate collecting. His visits to Ethan's apartment were often marked by lively discussions about art, history, and the subtle nuances of visual storytelling. As Ethan busied himself in the kitchen preparing refreshments, Marcus arrived early, a welcome surprise. He settled onto the living room sofa, his eyes, ever observant, immediately drawn to the leather-bound photo album lying innocently on the coffee table. "Well, look what we have here," Marcus mused aloud, his voice a low, intrigued rumble. "A genuine antique, isn't it? Family heirlooms, Ethan?" Ethan, emerging from the kitchen with a tray of drinks, nodded with a casual shrug. "Yeah, just some old family photos from my parents' last big clear-out. Haven't really gone through them properly." He set down the tray, expecting Marcus to simply admire the binding or perhaps comment on the photographic techniques of the era. But Marcus, ever the meticulous scholar, didn't just admire. He carefully opened the album, his fingers delicately tracing the edges of the faded pages. He moved slowly, methodically, his gaze lingering on each black and white print, offering quiet observations about fashion trends, architectural styles, and the subtle shifts in family dynamics visible across the years. Then he reached a particular page, one of the earliest entries in the album. His thumb grazed the top corner of a small, unadorned black and white portrait. A hush fell over Marcus. The amiable banter ceased. Ethan, momentarily distracted by his phone, looked up to find Marcus absolutely still, his head tilted slightly, his eyes narrowed in intense, almost forensic examination of the photograph. His usual relaxed demeanor had evaporated, replaced by a focused intensity that Ethan recognized from Marcus's professional engagements. A ripple of apprehension, cold and unsettling, stirred in Ethan's stomach. "Ethan," Marcus finally said, his voice quiet, devoid of its usual warmth, is this you?" He held the photograph closer to his face, then extended it slightly, as if to gauge its spatial dimensions. Ethan walked over, peering over his friend's shoulder. It was the Miami studio photo, the one from 1953. The 5-year-old version of himself stood between his smiling parents, his small, thin fingers almost comically long. "Yes, that's me," Ethan confirmed, a note of bewilderment in his voice. "From when I was 5. Why?" Marcus didn't immediately answer. He turned the photo slightly, angling it towards the window light, then back. He traced the outline of young Ethan's body with his finger, paying particular attention to the hands and the overall height proportion. "And this was taken in 53, he repeated, almost to himself, his voice now tinged with a distinct undertone of professional concern that unsettled Ethan profoundly. "Ethan, I'm not a doctor, you know that," Marcus finally began, his voice dropping to a serious, almost hushed tone. "But I've spent years studying human figures in historical photographs, noting physical characteristics, anomalies. And what I see here is striking." He looked up from the photo, his gaze meeting Ethan's. "Your hands, even at 5 years old, and your overall build, they're highly unusual. Have you ever been checked for anything specific? A connective tissue disorder, perhaps? Like Marfan syndrome?" The name hung in the air, a foreign, chilling sound. Marfan syndrome. Ethan's mind raced, connecting it to those fleeting mentions of symptoms he'd read online, the ones he'd dismissed. The chronic fatigue, the unexplained breathlessness, the subtle blurring of his vision, suddenly they converged, forming a coherent, terrifying pattern. A cold dread washed over him. He wanted to dismiss it, to laugh it off as Marcus's overly analytical nature, but the look in his friend's eyes, the quiet urgency in his voice, told him this was no mere academic observation. The photograph, once a forgotten relic, had now, through the discerning eye of a friend, thrown open a door to a possibility Ethan had never dared to consider, irrevocably altering the trajectory of his life. The word Marfan, uttered so cautiously by Marcus, echoed in Ethan's mind, a chilling whisper that gradually amplified into a roar. He spent the next few sleepless nights consumed by research, delving into medical websites and forums, each new piece of information confirming his growing dread. The symptoms listed for Marfan syndrome: elongated limbs, arachnodactyly, scoliosis, and, most terrifyingly, cardiovascular abnormalities, particularly involving the aorta, resonated with an alarming familiarity. His chronic fatigue, the inexplicable breathlessness, his worsening vision, all these seemingly disparate ailments suddenly coalesced into a frighteningly coherent picture. The specter of an aortic rupture, a sudden and fatal event, sent shivers down his spine, recalling the unsettling episodes of his own heart, pounding erratically, his lungs struggling for air. He desperately wanted to dismiss it as an overactive imagination, a hypochondriac's leap of faith. He tried to convince himself that Marcus, with his deep dive into visual details, had simply projected an academic theory onto a coincidence. Yet the black and white photograph, that silent witness from 1953, lay on his coffee table, an undeniable testament to the unusual proportions of his 5-year-old self. Each time he looked at it, he saw not just a nostalgic image, but a stark, unsettling blueprint of a hidden condition. The elongated fingers, once a whimsical detail, now seemed to point accusingly, demanding action. The mounting anxiety became unbearable. Ethan knew he could no longer afford to ignore this escalating internal battle. With a heavy heart, but a newfound resolve, he scheduled an appointment with his longtime family physician, Dr. Evelyn Shaw. Dr. Shaw, a kind woman in her late 50s with a calm demeanor and astute eyes, listened patiently as Ethan, visibly nervous, recounted Marcus's startling observation and his subsequent internet research. When he produced the faded photograph, Dr. Shaw took it, her expression shifting from polite attention to professional intrigue. She spent a long moment examining the image, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Ethan," she began, her voice steady as she handed the photo back, "while a diagnosis cannot be made from a photograph, your description of your symptoms, combined with this visual evidence, certainly warrants a thorough investigation. Marfan syndrome is rare, but its implications can be severe. We need to rule this out, or confirm it, for your peace of mind and, more importantly, for your health." Dr. Shaw immediately scheduled a battery of tests and consultations. Ethan was referred to a cardiologist, an ophthalmologist, an orthopedic specialist, and, crucially, a geneticist. She also ordered a comprehensive panel of blood and urine tests, looking for any general physiological markers that might shed further light on his condition. This first visit to Dr. Shaw's office marked a critical turning point. Ethan felt a paradoxical mix of terror and relief, terror at the tangible possibility of a life-threatening diagnosis, but immense relief at finally taking concrete steps towards understanding what had subtly plagued him for so long. His journey through the medical labyrinth began with the cardiologist. Dr. Alex Chen, a focused and meticulous man in his early 40s, performed an echocardiogram, the ultrasound of Ethan's heart. The procedure itself was routine, but Dr. Chen's intense concentration, the way his eyes remained glued to the monitor, filled Ethan with a growing sense of dread. After a prolonged examination, Dr. Chen finally turned to him, his face grave. "Mr. Caldwell," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, "your echocardiogram shows a dilation or enlargement of the aortic root. It's not yet critical, but it's significant and requires immediate attention. This finding, combined with your reported physical characteristics and symptoms, strongly suggests a connective tissue disorder." This was the first concrete medical validation of his fears, a chilling confirmation that Marcus's casual observation had indeed been prescient. Next came the visit to the ophthalmologist. The examination revealed not just simple myopia, but a partial subluxation of the crystalline lens in both of Ethan's eyes, a displacement that explained his increasingly blurry and distorted vision. This, too, was a known symptom of Marfan syndrome, a pattern emerging with terrifying clarity. Each consultation, each new test, chipped away at his denial, replacing it with an undeniable and escalating certainty. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, constructing a picture that was both frightening and illuminating. Ethan now braced himself for the most pivotal appointment of all, the one with the geneticist. He understood, with a dawning and profound clarity, that the old photograph, rediscovered after half a century, was not just a curiosity but a crucial map guiding him through the intricate landscape of his own body, pointing directly to a hidden threat and perhaps to the only path towards survival. The waiting room of Dr. Lillian Albright, the geneticist, felt like a crucible. Ethan Caldwell sat, his hands clasped tightly, the familiar black and white photograph of his 5-year-old self resting on his lap. He had carried it with him to every appointment, a silent, almost talismanic presence. The preliminary findings from the cardiologist and ophthalmologist had been stark, undeniable confirmations of his deepest fears. Now the final verdict awaited. Dr. Albright, a woman in her late 40s with a calm, discerning demeanor and sharp, intelligent eyes, greeted him with a gentle smile that did little to ease the tension in the room. She was known for her empathetic approach, yet Ethan knew she would deliver the truth without sugarcoating. He handed over the thick folder containing all his recent medical reports, the echocardiogram detailing the alarming dilation of his aortic root, the ophthalmologist's diagnosis of lens subluxation, and the battery of blood tests that, frustratingly, showed no general inflammatory markers or obvious deficiencies. Lastly, he presented the photograph, a slightly tremulous hand placing it on her desk. Dr. Albright meticulously reviewed each document, her silence punctuated only by the soft rustle of paper. Her gaze then settled on the photograph. She took it in her hands, holding it up to the light, observing the nuanced shades of gray, the subtle grain of the vintage print. She spent a long moment, unhurried, studying the image of young Ethan, her eyes tracing the outline of his slender limbs, his remarkably long fingers. She then produced a specialized caliper, carefully measuring the proportions of his child self depicted in the photo, comparing them against established growth charts and known phenotypic expressions. Ethan watched, mesmerized as she worked, a strange mix of clinical detachment and profound focus on her face. "Ethan," Dr. Albright finally spoke, her voice measured, as she gently placed the photograph back on the desk. "Based on your clinical symptoms, the findings from your cardiology and ophthalmology evaluations, and what we observe in this photograph, my suspicion is very strong. We've already sent off the blood sample for genetic sequencing. That will give us the definitive answer. But all signs point to Marfan syndrome." The words, though anticipated, still hit Ethan with the force of a physical blow. Marfan. The name, which had been a distant, abstract concept just weeks ago, was now a looming reality. His breath hitched in his throat. He felt a wave of dizziness, the room momentarily blurring around him. He had hoped, against all reason, that there might be another explanation, a less severe diagnosis. But now it seemed inevitable. Dr. Albright, sensing his profound distress, continued in a softer tone, explaining the nature of the condition. It's a genetic disorder affecting connective tissue, primarily caused by a mutation in the FBN1 gene. This gene is responsible for producing fibrillin-1, a protein vital for forming elastic fibers. When this protein is faulty, the connective tissue becomes weaker, more elastic than it should be. That's why we see manifestations in the skeleton, eyes, and most critically, the cardiovascular system. The enlargement of your aorta, the lens dislocation, these are classic signs. She explained that while the genetic sequencing would take a few more weeks, the clinical evidence was overwhelmingly persuasive. Those weeks became an agonizing eternity for Ethan. Each day was a tightrope walk between hope and despair. He attempted to maintain his professional facade, but his concentration wavered, his thoughts constantly circling back to the impending confirmation. He became acutely aware of every beat of his heart, every subtle sensation in his chest, every minor ache in his joints, now magnified by the shadow of the diagnosis. The waiting was, in many ways, worse than the initial shock. Finally, the call came exactly 3 weeks later. It was Dr. Albright. Her voice, though calm, carried the weight of confirmation. "Mr. Caldwell, your genetic sequencing results have arrived. They confirm the presence of a pathogenic variant in the FBN1 gene, consistent with a diagnosis of Marfan syndrome." The pronouncement, now undeniable, brought a strange, almost unsettling sense of finality. A profound sadness washed over him, a mourning for the life he thought he had, free from such a burden. Yet, beneath it, a nascent sense of relief began to surface. The long years of vague symptoms, the inexplicable fatigue, the subtle physical distinctions, they finally had a name, a logical explanation. He was no longer just unusually tall or prone to fatigue. He had a condition, and with a diagnosis came the possibility of action. Dr. Albright then shifted to the crucial next steps, her voice gaining a renewed urgency. "The most important thing, Ethan, is that we have found this now. Your photograph and your friend's astute observation literally gave us a 50-year head start. Had this gone undiagnosed, given the extent of your aortic dilation, the outcome could have been very different. We need to act quickly to manage this. Her words were a stark reminder of the knife edge he had been living on. The sheer, overwhelming irony of a forgotten childhood snapshot, once a mere curiosity, now stood revealed as the sole reason he still had a future. He knew the path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a very long time, Ethan felt a flicker of hope amidst the dread, the terrifying truth now his guide. The definitive diagnosis of Marfan syndrome, confirmed by the cold, irrefutable data of genetic sequencing, hung in the air like a shroud. The initial shock had given way to a chilling clarity, and now, in Dr. Albright's quiet office, Ethan Caldwell faced the unvarnished truth of his condition. Dr. Albright, her voice calm but firm, laid out the full implications, painting a stark picture of the silent adversary that had been residing within him for a lifetime. She utilized intricate diagrams and anatomical models, pointing to the delicate structures of the heart and the aorta, explaining how the faulty fibrillin protein, a consequence of his mutated FBN1 gene, compromised the integrity of connective tissues throughout his body. Ethan, she began, her gaze unwavering, the most critical concern for individuals with Marfan syndrome is the cardiovascular system, specifically the aorta, the largest artery, which carries oxygenated blood from your heart to the rest of your body. Because the walls of the aorta are weakened by the defective connective tissue, they are prone to gradual dilation or enlargement. This relentless pressure over decades can lead to a dissecting aneurysm, where the layers of the aortic wall separate, or, in the most severe cases, a full rupture. Either scenario is a medical emergency, often fatal if not addressed immediately. Her words were a thunderclap, echoing the terrifying information Ethan had glimpsed online. He remembered those unexplained episodes of breathlessness, the frantic pounding heartbeats that had dismissed as anxiety or exertion. Now they were revealed as desperate warnings, his body crying out from the edge of catastrophe. The sheer horror of it washed over him. He had been living with a silent, ticking time bomb, a hidden fragility that could have given way at any moment during any mundane activity, a brisk walk, a hearty laugh even during sleep. The realization that he had unknowingly walked this tightrope for 5 decades, utterly oblivious to the razor-thin margin between life and sudden death, sent a cold wave of fear through him. It was a terrifying reevaluation of his entire existence. Dr. Albright meticulously detailed other potential complications: the progressive visual impairment due to the dislocation of his eye lenses, the possibility of scoliosis, joint hypermobility, and even certain lung conditions. She stressed that the manifestation of symptoms varied greatly among individuals with Marfan syndrome, making early detection crucial. Many individuals with such significant aortic dilation, she explained, her voice tinged with a quiet solemnity, do not live to your age without intervention. The fact that your condition remained undiagnosed for 50 years, yet without a catastrophic event, is in its own way a testament to your body's resilience, but also an extraordinary stroke of luck. She then turned to the black and white photograph, picking it up gently. "And this photograph, Ethan," she said, her eyes meeting his, "it's more than just a family memento. It's an incredible piece of diagnostic evidence. Without the subtle visual clues it provided to your friend and his persistence in urging you to seek help, your current symptoms might have been dismissed as age-related, or, by the time they became severe enough to warrant deeper investigation, it might have been too late. This photograph, in a very real sense, saved your life." Her words were a profound revelation. They didn't diminish the fear, but they imbued it with a fragile hope. The terrifying truth was accompanied by the immense gratitude for a chance at intervention. Ethan left Dr. Albright's office a changed man. The familiar Miami streets, the bustling sounds, the warmth of the sun, they all seemed sharper, more vivid, imbued with a newfound preciousness. He now carried the knowledge of his vulnerability, a constant awareness that would forever alter his relationship with his own body. Every ache, every subtle sensation, now carried a weight of significance. It was a daunting prospect, but for the first time he understood the enemy. And armed with that knowledge, he could now fight. The forgotten snapshot, resurrected from the depths of time, had not only unmasked a hidden threat, but also presented him with an unexpected, profound opportunity for a future he never knew he might not have. The raw terror that had gripped Ethan Caldwell in Dr. Albright's office began to slowly, painstakingly, transmute into a fierce resolve. The diagnosis of Marfan syndrome, and particularly the perilous dilation of his aortic root, demanded immediate and decisive action. Dr. Albright, in collaboration with Dr. Alex Chen, his cardiologist, formulated an aggressive treatment plan. The initial phase involved a strict regimen of medication, beta blockers to regulate his heart rate and blood pressure, and ACE inhibitors to further reduce the strain on his weakened aorta. Ethan adhered to this protocol with an almost monastic discipline. Every pill swallowed was a conscious act of defiance against the silent enemy within, a small but vital investment in his precarious future. He meticulously avoided any physical exertion that could spike his blood pressure, eschewing heavy lifting, strenuous exercise, and even quick, sudden movements. Regular, detailed echocardiograms became a routine part of his life, each scan a tense examination of the imperiled artery. These initial weeks and months were a crucible for Ethan. On one hand, he felt like a prisoner in his own body, every action measured, every breath monitored, every sensation scrutinized. The spontaneity of his former life, the freedom of movement he had taken for granted, seemed like a distant dream. On the other hand, a profound gratitude began to bloom within him. He understood with chilling clarity that this meticulous monitoring and medication were not a burden, but a lifeline. Without the timely diagnosis, prompted by that forgotten photograph, he would have remained utterly unaware, marching unwittingly towards a catastrophic end. He was living on borrowed time, and this regimen was paying back that debt. Yet medication, Dr. Chen had emphasized, was merely a holding pattern. During a follow-up consultation, his expression somber, Dr. Chen delivered the inevitable news. "Ethan," he stated, pointing to the magnified image of Ethan's aorta on the screen, "your aortic root has reached a critical threshold. The risk of dissection or rupture is too high to continue with only medical management. We cannot simply observe this any longer. Surgical intervention, specifically a root and ascending aorta replacement, is no longer an option. It is a necessity. It is the only way to safeguard your future and ensure a long-term, stable outcome." The thought of open-heart surgery, of his chest being opened, his heart stopped, filled Ethan with a primal dread. It was a monumental, terrifying prospect, a direct confrontation with the fragility his body secretly harbored. The recovery, he knew, would be arduous and prolonged. Yet, interwoven with this fear was a fierce determination. He recognized that this was not a choice, but a lifeline. This complex operation was the direct, inescapable consequence of the insidious disease that had progressed, undetected, for half a century. And it was precisely because of that serendipitous rediscovery of the old photograph that he even had this chance. He met with Dr. Benjamin Thorne, the lead cardiothoracic surgeon, a man whose reputation preceded him, known for his steady hand and calm demeanor, even in the most intricate of procedures. Dr. Thorne patiently walked Ethan through every stage of the surgery, the sternotomy, the cardiopulmonary bypass, the careful excision of the dilated aortic root, and its replacement with a durable synthetic graft. He explained the potential risks, the extensive recovery period, and the expected long-term benefits. Ethan listened intently, asking probing questions, desperate to understand every nuance, to gain some semblance of control over the profound vulnerability he faced. He informed his parents who, though profoundly shaken, offered unwavering support and vowed to be by his side. The day of the surgery arrived, a cool morning in late April 2004. Ethan arrived at the hospital, his heart thrumming with a mixture of terror and a strange, almost spiritual readiness. In his mind, he carried the image of the black and white photograph, a silent sentinel that had guided him to this critical juncture. It had become more than just paper and ink. It was a tangible symbol of his fight, a reminder of the improbable chain of events that had led him here. As the surgical team prepared him and the anesthetic began its gentle descent into oblivion, the last thing he saw was the focused, reassuring face of Dr. Thorne standing over him and the cold, sterile glow of the operating theater lights. The surgery itself lasted for grueling hours, a precise dance of skill and technology. The surgeons successfully replaced the weakened aortic root with a robust artificial conduit, effectively neutralizing the immediate threat of rupture. Ethan spent several critical days in the intensive care unit, battling pain, disorientation, and the profound trauma to his body. Slowly, painstakingly, with each passing day, he felt life seeping back into his veins. The world around him seemed brighter, sharper, imbued with an almost luminous quality. Every breath, every beat of his heart felt like a miracle. He had been granted a second chance, an opportunity snatched from the jaws of a silent, almost invisible danger. He understood now, with an undeniable clarity, that the black and white photograph from 1953 was not merely a memory, but a profound, almost mystical catalyst, an unsuspecting key that had unlocked the secret of his ailing body and guided him through the narrow gate of survival. The arduous journey of recovery from open-heart surgery was a testament to Ethan Caldwell's newfound resilience. Each day was a step on a long, winding path, marked by small victories and inevitable setbacks. The initial days in the hospital were a haze of pain, discomfort, and a profound sense of vulnerability. Yet, even in his weakest moments, the image of that old black and white photograph flickered in his mind, a constant, silent reminder of the incredible chain of events that had brought him to this point. It was a catalyst, a symbol of the life he was fighting to reclaim. His parents, Mary and James, having rushed to his side, provided an unwavering anchor, their presence a balm to his bruised spirit. Slowly, painstakingly, Ethan began to mend. The surgical incision, a stark reminder of the invasive procedure, gradually healed. Physical therapy sessions, initially agonizing, became a series of small, incremental triumphs. He relearned how to breathe deeply, how to walk without assistance, how to perform the simplest tasks that had once been effortless. Every muscle seemed to ache, every movement felt monumental, but he pushed through, driven by a fierce determination to live the second chance he had been so miraculously granted. The medical team, including the vigilant Dr. Albright and the precise Dr. Chen, monitored his progress with meticulous care, guiding him through each phase of rehabilitation. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan gradually returned to his apartment in Miami, but it was a fundamentally altered existence. The casual disregard he once held for his body was replaced by a profound, almost reverent awareness. He could no longer ignore the subtle whispers of his physical being. Regular medical checkups, once a dreaded chore, became non-negotiable appointments. He adhered to a strict regimen of medication, a daily ritual that reinforced his commitment to his health. Echocardiograms to monitor his new aortic graft, ophthalmological checkups to track his lens subluxation, and periodic consultations with Dr. Albright to assess his overall genetic condition became integral parts of his life's rhythm. These visits were no longer a source of dread, but rather a comforting reassurance, a tangible demonstration of his ongoing vigilance. His lifestyle underwent a radical transformation. The demanding, high-stress work that had once consumed him now seemed less important. He restructured his professional life, delegating tasks that required intense physical or mental strain and prioritizing projects that offered greater creative fulfillment with less pressure. He embraced new forms of physical activity, gentle swimming in the warm Miami waters, long contemplative walks along the coastline, and mindful yoga practices that centered both his body and his mind. The competitive sports of his youth were replaced by activities that nourished rather than taxed his delicate system. His diet became meticulously balanced, and stress management, once an abstract concept, became a daily practice. More profoundly, Ethan's inner world had undergone a seismic shift. The brush with mortality had stripped away the superficial, leaving behind a core of profound gratitude and a re-evaluated set of priorities. He found solace and immense joy in the simple, everyday moments, the golden hues of a Miami sunset, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, a genuine conversation with a friend, the uninhibited laughter of his nieces and nephews during their visits. His previously reserved nature softened. He became more open, more vulnerable, willing to share his journey and struggles. The long-held stoicism that had prevented him from seeking help for decades gave way to a courageous willingness to expose his own fragility. He discovered a new, unexpected purpose: advocacy. Ethan began to speak publicly, sharing his extraordinary story at medical symposia, patient support groups, and even community events. He detailed his childhood peculiarities, the gradual onset of symptoms, Marcus's serendipitous observation, and the life-saving diagnosis. He always brought that black-and-white photograph with him, holding it up as a tangible symbol of his odyssey. He explained how this seemingly innocuous image, a snapshot from 1953, had held the vital clue that modern medicine eventually deciphered, illustrating the incredible interplay between past artifacts and future health. His narrative resonated deeply. People approached him after his talks, their eyes filled with recognition, sharing their own stories of perplexing symptoms or family health mysteries. He received countless emails and letters from individuals across the globe, expressing gratitude and recounting how his experience had prompted them or their loved ones to seek early diagnosis for previously undiagnosed conditions. Several heart-wrenching messages described how, inspired by his bravery, they had uncovered similar genetic predispositions in their own families, allowing for critical, life-altering interventions. Ethan Caldwell, a man whose life could have ended abruptly and inexplicably, now lived with a profound sense of purpose. He embraced his diagnosis not as a life sentence, but as a perpetual reminder of a second chance, an invitation to live with intentionality and profound appreciation. The once-hidden secret within his body had been unveiled, but in its revelation, it had not diminished him. Instead, it had reshaped him, transforming him into a beacon of hope and a testament to the extraordinary power of a single, forgotten photograph. His new chapter had begun, rich with purpose and the enduring light of unexpected salvation. Ethan Caldwell's life, once almost silently extinguished, had been remarkably resurrected. The journey from a hidden diagnosis to a life-saving intervention had transformed him, imbuing his existence with a profound sense of purpose. He no longer saw his survival as merely a personal triumph, but as a crucial narrative, a lesson to be shared, a beacon of hope and vigilance for others who might unknowingly walk a similar path. He became a tireless advocate for early diagnosis of rare genetic conditions, his voice carrying the weight of lived experience and the undeniable proof of unexpected salvation. His platform grew steadily. He began by speaking at local community centers, then to patient support groups for Marfan syndrome, and eventually found himself invited to national medical conferences and even international symposiums on genetic disorders. His story resonated with a universal appeal: the quiet struggle, the missed clues, the dramatic revelation, and the ultimate triumph of medical science and personal resilience. He spoke with a quiet intensity, his words unadorned but powerful, painting vivid pictures of his childhood in Miami, the subtle physical distinctions that were brushed aside, and the insidious progression of a disease he never knew he carried. Central to every presentation, a silent yet eloquent co-narrator, was that black-and-white photograph from 1953. Ethan would always display it prominently, a tangible link to his past and a potent symbol of his present. He would describe the seemingly innocent setting of the Miami photo studio, the warmth of his parents' embrace, and then, with a dramatic pause, he would point to his own 5-year-old hands, emphasizing the unusual length of his fingers, the subtle elongation of his limbs. He explained how this seemingly innocuous detail, captured by the indifferent lens of a vintage camera, had remained hidden for half a century, only to be unearthed and deciphered by a confluence of fortunate events and keen professional observation. He elaborated on the profound irony of it all. A simple, forgotten family keepsake held a blueprint of his genetic destiny, a silent scream for help that went unheard until the convergence of Marcus's discerning eye and modern diagnostic capabilities. He underscored the vital importance of integrating historical visual data into contemporary medical diagnostics, arguing that sometimes the most revealing clues lie not in cutting-edge technology, but in the overlooked artifacts of the past. His narrative was a compelling case study, showcasing how even the minutest visual anomaly, when examined through an informed lens, could unlock mysteries that confound conventional medical approaches. The impact of his advocacy was palpable. After his talks, lines of people would form, eager to speak with him, their faces a mixture of awe, concern, and newfound hope. Parents, holding photographs of their own children, would ask him to look, their eyes searching for any hint of those unnoticed distinctions he spoke of. Adults shared their own stories of perplexing symptoms, inspired by Ethan to revisit their health concerns with a new perspective. His words sparked a wave of proactive, health-seeking behavior. He received countless messages, emails, handwritten letters, even social media comments, from individuals around the world who shared how his testimony had prompted them to seek genetic counseling or diagnostic evaluations for themselves or their family members. Several reported life-changing outcomes, early diagnoses of Marfan syndrome, or similar conditions that allowed for timely interventions, preventing the very catastrophes Ethan had narrowly escaped. One particularly poignant moment occurred at a major international genetics conference in 2016. As Ethan concluded his keynote address, a standing ovation erupted. Amidst the applause, he saw Dr. Albright and Dr. Chen in the front row, their faces alight with pride and admiration. Later, as they spoke, Dr. Albright placed a hand on his arm. "Ethan," she said, her voice filled with genuine warmth, "your story has become more than just a medical case. It's a cornerstone for our educational programs, a living testament to the power of observation, interdisciplinary collaboration, and the invaluable role that even seemingly trivial historical artifacts can play in saving lives. You've truly turned your experience into a profound legacy." Ethan looked at them, then at the black and white photograph still clutched in his hand. He understood then, with a clarity that transcended the pain and fear he had endured, that his journey was not solely his own. It was a shared human experience, a testament to resilience, curiosity, and the enduring connection between past, present, and future. His life, once a silent enigma, was now an open book, its pages filled with lessons for anyone willing to listen. And at the heart of that narrative, a timeless black and white image, taken in a sunlit studio in Miami in 1953, continued its quiet, powerful work, illuminating hidden truths and inspiring a new generation of vigilance. Years flowed into decades like the gentle currents of the Miami River winding towards the vast, open ocean. Ethan Caldwell, now a man in his late 60s with a distinguished silver in his once light brown hair, lived a life not just survived, but profoundly lived. The terrifying shadow of Marfan syndrome, once a silent, deadly companion, had been irrevocably altered by timely intervention. He walked with a renewed sense of purpose, his posture straighter, his steps more deliberate. Every morning, as the first rays of the Miami sun painted his apartment in hues of gold and rose, he felt a profound, almost spiritual gratitude for the precious gift of each new day. His once fragile body, meticulously repaired and carefully managed, now served him with unwavering loyalty, and at the quiet heart of this transformed existence lay the enduring image of that faded black-and-white photograph. That single snapshot, captured in the unassuming Miami studio in 1953, was no longer merely a family relic. It had become a tangible embodiment of destiny's intricate dance, a powerful testament to the unforeseen ways in which life's most profound secrets can be revealed. How many such seemingly ordinary pictures lay tucked away in dusty albums across the globe? How many individuals, perhaps unknowingly, carried within them the dormant echoes of genetic predispositions, their bodies whispering clues that remained unheard? Ethan's story transcended his personal narrative. It became a vivid, poignant case study, demonstrating that sometimes the most crucial key to unlocking a hidden truth lies not in the intricate labyrinth of advanced technology, but in the unassuming details of a forgotten past. Ethan often found himself contemplating the myriad what-ifs. What if Marcus, his perceptive friend, hadn't visited that specific day? What if his keen eye hadn't settled upon that particular album, that specific faded image? What if the cardboard box containing that priceless fragment of history had remained lost forever in the depths of the miller's attic? The answer, stark and unforgiving, was a chilling certainty. His life would almost certainly have concluded prematurely, tragically, without warning. The relentless progression of his aortic dilation would have inexorably led to a fatal rupture, a sudden, brutal end that would have left his family consumed by grief and agonizing bewilderment, forever wondering what silent affliction had stolen him away. His journey became a living, breathing testament to the bewildering complexity of the human organism and the ingenious, sometimes cryptic, ways in which nature leaves its breadcrumbs. Marfan syndrome, like countless other rare genetic conditions, often manifests through subtle, nonspecific symptoms. Its early signs, so understated, they are easily dismissed as mere individual quirks or benign familial traits. It was precisely for this reason that Ethan Caldwell's story resonated so profoundly within the medical community and among the general public. It implored vigilance, advocated for a heightened awareness of one's own body, and encouraged a proactive approach to health, urging individuals not to dismiss even the faintest whispers of discomfort or anomaly. Ethan continued his tireless advocacy, his voice a steady, compelling force in the world of rare diseases. He embraced his role as an ambassador of awareness, his mission to impress upon anyone who would listen a simple yet profoundly vital truth. Health is not a passive given, but an active, ongoing responsibility, demanding constant attention, careful stewardship, and sometimes the extraordinary capacity to discern the hidden within the commonplace. His life had become a compelling narrative, a testament to the remarkable fact that even the deepest, darkest secrets buried within the past can, with the right combination of chance and insight, illuminate a path towards a vibrant future. And each time he held that old, slightly creased photograph, a window to his earliest years, Ethan felt not only an overwhelming sense of gratitude, but also a profound reverence for the incredible, interwoven tapestry of his own existence. In that single black and white image, captured in a distant Miami studio in 1953, lay the very essence of his remarkable second chance, a silent echo of a near tragedy averted, and the enduring power of an unseen clue that shaped his destiny.